Oh, hey, don't mind me. I'm just watching my favorite movie. I love this part, and man, I love this movie so much. I wish there was a way I could interact with it more directly. They've got a video game version coming out, and I can't wait to play it. But what am I going to do in the meantime? Huh. The 2000s were a great time for gaming. I consider this to be the start of the modern era, where people started to take games more seriously as an art form rather than just a way to make your stupid kid sit still for 5 minutes. Of course, as games started to attract a wider audience, other industries started to take notice, and they wanted a piece. Hollywood, baby, there isn't a single hole these guys wouldn't stick their cocks in to make a quick buck. Yeah, no, I'd that. Now, licensed games had been around for a while at this point, especially on the NES. You had movies, game shows, toys, McDonald's, but the mid-2000s is where movie tie-ins specifically started to become inescapable. For a while, it felt like basically every movie had a game releasing alongside it. Now, movie tie-ins already had a bit of a reputation for being, for lack of a better word, bad, with one of them being so bad it almost destroyed the entire industry. But surely we've learned our lesson by now, right? Yeah, they can't all be winners. The simple fact is, in the 8-bit era, a small team could squirt out a game in less than a year, but by the 6th generation, games have become much more complex to develop. It just wasn't feasible to launch them day and day with the movies anymore. But boy did they try! I love collecting these games. It's such a great way to look behind the curtain of game development. It's not every day you get to play a half-finished game. If you look closely, you can see exactly which corners they cut. That said, I do have some great memories of these games. A series of unfortunate events on the PS2, and no, I'm not talking about the High Impact Games library. This is an entry in the ever-popular "we don't know how to adapt this property to an interactive medium, so we made a 3D puzzle platformer" genre. This Wikipedia article is starting to make a lot more sense. This is what I mean when I say it felt like every movie had to have a tie-in game. Adapting an action or an adventure movie into a video game makes a ton of sense, but a kid's comedy movie like this, why was this necessary? It apparently came with a ticket to the movie though, which is a nice bonus that surprisingly few of these games included. The game itself isn't too bad though. Throughout most of the game you play as either Violet or Klaus, with the occasional 2.5D platforming section as Sunny. Drawing inspiration from the film, Violet is a brilliant inventor and Klaus is a fucking nerd. Much of the progression in the game revolves around gathering garbage to make new tools in order to solve various platforming challenges, as well as beat the shit out of the same 3 enemies over and over again. The combat is pretty bland and mostly seems to be shoehorned in to give the game some variety, but I do really like the idea of collecting parts to build up your abilities. It almost makes it feel like a sort of Metroidvania, but much more linear. Overall, you could do worse than this for a movie tie-in. The game's very short. I finished it in a little over 3 hours, and I could see how that might piss you off if you bought it for full price in 2004. But let's be honest, you didn't. Your parents bought it because they didn't know any better. At least they got most of the original cast to come back for it. Thank you to my team and my amigos for your unwillingness to accept mediocrity. I mean, I guess you tried. Bionicle was huge during this era, and it practically saved LEGO from bankruptcy. High-quality action figures with their own background lore, if any of LEGO's products could launch a multimedia franchise, this was it. So when the Bionicle Mask of Light movie was announced along with a tie-in video game, 9-year-old me was so excited. The plot of the game is a somewhat loose reinterpretation of the movie, which I think was definitely a good move. While the movie follows these 2 kids as they look for the owner of a mask they found, the game follows the 6 main Bionicle characters as they do other shit while the movie plays out off screen. I would prefer to see an original story for Bionicle's first big video game venture, but at the very least I'm glad we got to play as the main cast. Now if only it was good. You only have 2 moves that you can use in combat, a nondescript energy ball you can throw and a shield that blocks attacks and recharges your energy ball. It's baffling to me that this is what they went with when most of the characters have their own unique weapon that they're literally holding throughout the game. Not only that, but each character plays exactly the same. They all just have some asinine gimmick to trick you into thinking they're different. Snow level, you're snowboarding here. Water level, now you have to swim. Underground level, you have to push some rocks that are covered in butter for some reason. It's obvious they didn't have time to develop 6 completely unique movesets, but surely they could have come up with like a basic melee combo that would translate well between all the characters. It would have made combat a little more interesting at least. Maybe I'm being a little too harsh on the combat. This is a 3D platformer after all. The combat isn't supposed to be the main focus. But the thing is, nothing else really stands out here. The best word I can use to describe the platforming is fine. It does its job of challenging me just enough that I don't fall asleep with my thumb on the stick, but there's nothing special here. Most of the levels revolve around gathering the Matorans, the citizens of the Bionicle world, in order to get their help passing some obstacle. Of course, I didn't realize that's what I was doing until about the 4th level, since they're all basically placed directly in your path. You never really have to go out of your way to collect them, which makes the game just feel like a jog from point A to point B. And on top of all that, the sound design in this game is truly awful. Every time you finish a level, you get an end screen that counts how many of the generic crystals you found, and it is way too loud.
I must return to the others at once.
Some sounds just start and stop randomly, like this waterfall in the water level. And then sometimes the sound design is just completely absent, like in this lava surfing level with no background music, no background sound, nothing. Bionicle was a product that very clearly had a ton of love and effort poured into it. Ultimately, it's a shame that this game didn't get enough of that. There is a lot about this that I like. The character animations, combined with some decent voice acting for a licensed game, really do bring these characters to life in a way that was exciting as a kid. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough. I'd like to think that if this game and the movie that spawned it were given a little more time and effort, we could have seen Bionicle become its own multimedia franchise like some of LEGO's later ventures like Ninjago or their own movie licensed properties. But I guess that wasn't meant to be, and Bionicle will always just be a relic of my childhood. Speaking of relics from my childhood, why won't you die? The Simpsons is an American animated sitcom created by Matt Groening for the Fox Broadcasting Company. The series is a satirical depiction of American life, epitomized by the Simpson family, and my god, there are 35 seasons, why won't someone make it stop? Wikipedia is really telling it like it is today. The Simpsons have been around for almost as long as video games in general, and as such they have a long history with video game tie-ins that they try not to talk about. And yet with all of these various Simpson games, only one was allowed to carry the definitive title of The Simpsons game. Now, calling this a movie tie-in is a bit of a stretch. It did come out a little over 3 months after the Simpsons movie and had a completely original plot, but I do remember seeing plenty of trailers for both around the same time. I think the intention was definitely for both projects to drum up hype for each other. And it has all the other common traits of a movie tie-in. It's a 3D puzzle platformer, it released on just about every console, it f***ing sucked. They even made a joke in the trailer about releasing on every platform ever, which they had to walk back since it was technically false advertising. EA learned the hard way what the rest of us knew all along. You don't fuck with the ColecoVision. Where this game shines is definitely the writing. Rather than tossing it off to a B team like most tie-ins would, the game was written by veteran writers from the TV show. The game itself is a completely original story, not based on the movie or on an episode of the show or anything. The Simpsons discover they're in a video game and gain superpowers because of it. Throughout the game, the family discovers their legacy of being in shit games and confront Matt Groening himself about it. The original plot combined with actual 2D animation, once again from veteran Simpsons animators instead of the monstrous 3D models from previous Simpsons games, really goes a long way toward making this a quality translation from television to gaming. It'd be nice if they went a little further and made the game good too. Yeah, clunky controls, a weirdly combative camera, and just kind of boring combat. It's a movie tie-in, alright. You can tell that clearly a lot of effort went into it, but like most of these games, I suspect it was rushed out the door to release alongside the movie, and it didn't even make it. It's a shame too, since there are some really cool ideas in the gameplay, and the later levels are simultaneously a love letter to gaming as a whole, and a criticism of some troubling trends that started to emerge in the industry around this time. This is surprising not only because many of these critiques are still relevant today, but also because this game was made by EA, who were already one of the worst offenders on most of these, and they haven't got any better. All in all, while none of these games are going to set the world on fire, I still kinda like collecting them. The movie tie-in game is basically dead nowadays. Hollywood's wisened up, and instead of pushing for mediocre tie-ins to launch day and day with their movies, they're taking their time and making legitimately good games that expand the world they've created, and occasionally pushing out some garbage for us all to point and laugh at. And even though they weren't always that good, and usually they were downright awful, I still think movie tie-ins deserve a spot in gaming history. No, not there! That's better. At the end of the day, I think it might have been naive to expect too much from these games. After all, when has Hollywood ever delivered? I guess the lesson here is that you shouldn't just mindlessly buy any product that has your favorite IP slapped on it. Is what I would say if my copy of French Horn vs. Chair Final Match Edition didn't just show up.